I also go by the name of the Girl Against Fluoride. So, who am I? I am Aisling and I'm from Kerry. I'm 26 years old. And when I was 19 in college, I became really sick with depression. And I eventually ended up going to a doctor who said I had depression and, gave me antidepressants and that was it, kind of thing. And I didn't really feel very well and I was deteriorating all the time to the point where I couldn't go on anymore. Now, I'm a qualified occupational therapist, so at the end of my degree, I really just thought I don't really have a future. And, I had first class honours and it meant nothing to me because I actually had no energy to even apply for a job. So I ended up going to a nutritionist in the UK, and one of the first things she said to me was, "Are you aware that there's fluoride in your drinking water in the south of Ireland?" And I wasn't. I thought it was only in toothpaste. And she told me that fluoride can reduce your thyroid function, amongst other things, but mainly this can cause very, very bad depression and fatigue. So she said, stop using it, which I did. I came off all medication, and within 7 months I was fully better. So, long story short anyway, I became the Girl Against Fluoride last year, based on the fact that the lady who runs the college in England, who I went to, she came over and she said, if you do anything for this country, you have to get this out of the water. And what I have discovered, what I'll talk about, has been truly horrific alongside what the banks are doing. It really is like, diving into the rabbit hole and finding out. So the Girl Against Fluoride was born, it's very young, since August of 2012, so she's quite young. She's a little girl really, she's got a cape. She's very girly because the whole issue is very serious and, frightening for people to hear. So we created this superhero character, myself and my mom, who's in the audience there. And we said, we'll make her do crazy stunts because nobody just wants people going on, fluoride's bad for you, fluoride kills you, fluoride causes cancer. They're like, yeah, whatever, I don't believe you, I'm drinking water, I'm fine. So we thought, okay, we're going to have to do something really creative. We saw other campaigns in the past and they fizzled out, or they didn't get through, they didn't gain enough momentum. So the whole idea behind this is to basically galvanise the country and to get people behind us aware of the issue. Who is this girl against fluoride? Why is she stripping off? Just basically to try and engage. So the whole thing with our water, I thought it was fluoride, pharmaceutical grade fluoride you would imagine. But we actually have it's added to our water treatment plants, hydrofluoridic acid, which not only has fluoride, but it also has other contaminants like lead, aluminium, mercury, cadmium, and uranium, which you really don't want going next or near your body. It has been known for a long time, since the 1940s, that it is a waste product of the fertiliser industry. However, the Irish government claimed to us that they specially manufacture it for our teeth in Spain. That's how lucky we are. Yeah. And in its raw form, when it's brought into the water treatment plant, it's actually so corrosive that it will eat through stainless steel and concrete, but it's good for your teeth. It's been in our water, it'll be 50 years next year, so it came out under this Health Act, Health Fluoridation of Water Supplies in the 1960s, and that was challenged by Gladys Ryan, who took a case which ended up in the Supreme Court in 1963. Unfortunately, it didn't succeed, so we've had it here now 50 years, and there was actually a survey conducted in 2001, and 89% of people actually voted no against fluoride. And again, this seems to be coming up an awful lot. But again, the government, the health department, override anyone's objections. So, in almost 50 years, they have never once tested fluoride to be safe for our health. So there's no toxicological data in existence, even though they'll brandish it around that it's safe and effective. But there's no tests that exist. And we are in the minority here in Europe, in terms of 98% of the other countries that are not adding it to their water supply. So we have us in the Republic, 10% in the UK, and the Basque region in Spain. In Holland, actually, just give you an example of what other countries have done, that in 1976 they actually banned it and put it into their constitution, that they would never reintroduce it again. So, we really are behind here, and the fact that our neighbours in Northern Ireland is quite interesting to see the health statistics between the two, which I'll talk about later. So the Department of Health in 2004, they set up this Irish expert body in fluorides and health, and these really are a propaganda device. They keep saying it's good for your teeth. They dismiss any scientific evidence. Any scientist that comes out against this, they will disregard and ridicule and make out that person is inadequate. So this is the way it's going, and they're costing a lot of money to the taxpayer every year, this expert group, and they were meeting like 4 times a year. They do put their minutes up online, but they haven't actually met in the past year or 2 years nearly. And then we look at data from the World Health Organization. I don't know if you can kind of see this, but this is a graph that was made up. It's coming from the World Health Organization, and that was in 2012. That came out anyway, showing that in Ireland actually had the worst teeth in Europe, despite the fact that we're the only country to have this mandatory policy of fluoridation. So the whole argument behind putting this in the water really is quite inadequate. Last year, there's an environmental scientist who's been researching for fluoride in Ireland, and he was horrified last summer. He contacted us saying, "It's going to be out in the morning, this is it, I found the key information. Once they find out this, they'll definitely get it out." He found that hydrofluoric acid was banned in the EU due to its lack of toxicological data, 2006. So they were using it, as a biocide, a pesticide, but they looked to the company who was supplying these chemicals for their toxicological data, and they didn't supply anything, so it had to be put on this banned list. So we have an unauthorised biocide in our drinking water, but obviously it's good for your teeth. And Dr. James Riley, we have a lot of interesting letters. I'm sure Aidan Killian has had contact with this guy. He's a staunch advocate for fluoride, again, supporting the words of the expert body. But I don't think that he's a good role model, to be honest, for health. And on an international level, the whole fluoride fight is a global issue. There is a fantastic network, Fluoride Action Network, and you can find them on fluoridealert.org. I'd recommend, if you meet anyone who goes, "Oh yeah, whatever, I don't believe what you're saying, that's nonsense," they're only all cranks and conspiracy theorists. If you go on here, this is the best database in the world. If you go on to Fluoride Alert, if you spend 2 hours on this, you will be absolutely horrified. You couldn't possibly think that fluoride was any bit to do with your teeth. And it's made up of a board of toxicologists, people in medicine, chemistry, preventive dentistry, all very highly esteemed people that are calling for an end to fluoride. So the whole thing is this myth that fluoride is good for your teeth. And I think that's perpetuated by the fact that it's in your toothpaste you find in every shop. But if you look into the history of it, it really is very sinister, and there was fantastic work done by an investigative journalist, Christopher Bryson, who in the 90s, he put out a book called The Fluoride Deception, and he spent 10 years researching the history behind fluoride and the web of deceit surrounding this issue. And it really is like a tale, it's like a horror film. You would not even imagine it to be real, but it really is incredibly real. And it really is a matter of industry paying for their own research institutes to be set up to get their scientists to come out with fluoride's good for your teeth, so that they could dispose of their toxic industrial waste. And that's the kind of crux of it. And again, it's not only just people in science, it's also the civil servants, it's all the people that are in health, water treatment plants. It's been carried out, this scam, this act of poisoning people is being perpetuated the whole time by people's inaction. And again, the HSC continue to advocate for it, but yet if you ask them for tests, they can't produce any. And then not long ago they were saying it's good to smoke. I remember my grandfather was recommended to smoke, and he ended up getting a grapefruit-sized tumour in his lung. So again, who's paying for the information? You always have to ask yourself that question. Scientists that have spoken out, I said that they have been ridiculed and discredited. And again, there was a fantastic toxicologist from the States, Dr. Phyllis Mulnex, and she spoke out against fluoride because she was testing it on rats. She was doing animal experiments, and what she found out was truly horrific. This is all documented in the Fluoride Deception, so if any of you want to do any further reading, I'd recommend that. She found when rats were given fluoridated water, they were having symptoms of ADHD and autism and cognitive defects, and she was so horrified she ended up continuing, testing more rats to see if she get the same study. So she ended up sacrificing 500 rats, and the same thing kept coming out. And again, she spoke out. She exposed her findings to the scientists in the American communities, and they all turned against her. They didn't want to know, and her funding then was withdrawn, and she never worked in academia again. And this seems to be the case with whistleblowing scientists. They do try to destroy their careers, but luckily, more and more people are braving it. And we have our fantastic guy from Cork, his name is Declan Waugh. If any of you are on Facebook, he's always posting. He basically knew nothing about fluoride 2 years ago, and it was through his friend persisting that he looked into it that he decided to spend a weekend reviewing the scientific literature. And what he found out was mind-blowing. He couldn't believe this was happening. So he ended up putting a huge amount. He basically didn't even work. His own independent company was put on hold, and he ended up putting together this report. And this was given to the government last year, and it's not his. They're saying it's his own opinion, but he's basically bringing together international papers and putting them into a report. They're all peer-reviewed, and he's listing out the harm to human health, the environmental impact, and it's breaching almost 30 EU directives. So, he thought this would end fluoride, but again, he's being derided by the expert body. But his report has been used worldwide to end fluoride in other countries like Canada. And to me, the main kind of issue with fluoride, which was discovered by Phyllis Mullinex and also by other scientists in Harvard, the neurotoxic impact of fluoride. Because the fluoride it basically opens up the blood-brain barrier. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but it has the ability to remove the protective membrane in our brain, and it allows heavy metals to be able to be uptaked into the brain tissue, which can result in conditions like Alzheimer's. Now again, we don't have any testing, but the health stats show us that Ireland has the highest level of neurological illness in the world. We have twice the global average in the Republic of Ireland, which is a very scary statistic. And you see people now in their 30s to 50, there's a huge difference. In fact, 450% higher rates of early onset dementia in the south of Ireland compared to the north of Ireland. And the only difference between us and them is we have fluoride and they're not adding it. We are genetically the same, we're living on the same land, same exposures to radiation, etc. And last year, Harvard scientists, they came out with a study showing that fluoride was associated with the lowering of IQ. And this is based on a lot of studies coming from China. And then the US EPA now lists fluoride as a chemical that has evidence to have developmental neurotoxicity. So all again, it's pointing to the kind of neurotoxic effects. The only thing that the expert body and the Department of Health will actually tell us that it has any side effects is dental fluorosis. I know you can't really, I don't know if you can see there's like little white spots on the teeth. You might see people with that, you might not know what it's caused by, but it's actually a biomarker that your body has been oversaturated with fluoride in the early developmental years. And in fact, if it goes under a microscopic picture, you can actually see small pitted holes in the teeth, so it's actually damage to the cellular structure of the teeth. And that's just a sign, that's your outer skeleton. So if you have that if you're manifesting that on your teeth, you are going to have skeletal abnormalities, which will lead to osteoporosis and fractures in older years. So again, this is something that people can actually look for compensation, because this can cost a lot of money, because people who have dental fluorosis will need a lot of help and dental work over the years. Their teeth become brittle, so they will have to put in a lot of money. And another thing is, in Ireland we have the highest rate of bottle-fed babies in the world, and the American Dental Association and Centre for Disease Control and lots of other organisations, they recommend not to ever use fluoridated water when making up formula milk. But the Irish government say to use boiled water, which actually concentrates fluoride. So they're actually telling us to poison our own children. And the Institute of Medicine in the US recommends babies can only consume a tiny 10 micrograms of fluoride per day. So if an infant here in Ireland is consuming fluoridated formula, which most of them are, they are consuming up to 700 to 1,200 micrograms of fluoride. So about 100 times more than is the recommended amount on every day, and they're consuming the most amount of water of everyone, because baby's sole dietary intake is coming from water. Another thing is that fluoride has been found to calcify the pineal gland, and this can cause disturbances with sleep. It disturbs the melatonin production and serotonin production. So again, people can manifest insomnia, and also it can cause early onset puberty in children. So again, this is something that has nothing to do with teeth. And a friend of ours, actually Thomas Sheridan, said a very good. He put out a poster online, and he said that fluoride is so good for your teeth. That's why the government puts it in your brain. I just thought it was good. And if it's in your water, it's obviously in your food, because mostly all of our foods are processed with water, and they'll be using the main water supply. So we have here, a bit of fluoride cheese. Bit of fluoride cheese on your fluoride bread with your fluoride tea. So it's, again, fluoride is in our water at this optimal level that they claim, but it's in everything basically. So it's uncontrolled amounts of fluoride we're getting. And again, if you are a heavy water drinker like I am, I drink like a fish, you're going to be overdosing. These were maps that came out, and we basically just reproduced them. They're coming from the National Cancer Registry of Ireland, and these were like 3 of 15 maps. And just to explain the colours, basically the purple is twice the national average, so it's like double the level, and then the green then is going to half that. So in Ireland anyway, it found that all the rates of cancers, we have almost 50% higher than the north of Ireland, in some cases 60% higher. And again, this is not categorical proof that fluoride is causing all these cancers, but it does put huge question marks onto this issue that, what is the difference? An epidemiological study, you would say, who has been exposed to what in what country? And we have been dosed with this for the past 50 years, and in the north of Ireland they're not. So, it is a huge variable. So again, it is kind of something that needs to be taken very seriously. And again, even if you're not interested in debating science with people, the whole kind of argument is the ethical grounds that we are being mass medicated by fluoride, and that it is a breach of our right to bodily integrity. So again, this is another thing that the Irish expert body will not answer. Do you think it's ethical to mass medicate? They won't answer that. So we decided to develop this awareness campaign. This was last November. Bravely, I took off all my clothes in the winter outside the Dáil, as you do with pink balloons, and that's quite normal. Because that's what you have to do in this country, because people are, crazy. You have to do mental things to get their attention. So the guards obviously were very uncomfortable. It was funny because actually a cousin of mine, whose friend is one of the guards, he actually had posted it on his Facebook page. He's like, "What the hell is my cousin doing outside the Dáil with pink balloons and no clothes on, barely?" But anyway, it got the point across, fluoride girl. And then we had one last week, and we had Aidan Killian stripping off and everything. Out on Grafton Street. There's my mother dressed as the Pink Panther, because she's also as mad as I am. The whole thing was, we actually got great coverage on that day. We got coverage from RTE and everything from their Radio 1. So again, it was a photo call to get information out, and we put out loads of leaflets, and we actually had 1,200 hits on our website that day, just from doing that on the street. So again, it was a very great positive kind of action. And here's me with the girls against fluoride. There are 2 other girls, so they've joined the gang now again as well. And that was us, the group of us outside the Dáil. And I've done a number of things, like the Rose of Fluoride Free. People thought I was Rose of Florida and were congratulating me. And I was like, I'm actually Rose of Fluoride Free. Yeah, here's a leaflet. So we've done kind of unusual things, and I think it lifts the mood, and it gets people to kind of engage with you about something that they wouldn't necessarily want to even talk to you about. So again, it has been very successful, and we've got huge support through social media. We also have a number of celebrity endorsements, like we have Paddy Casey. We actually met Rachel Allen on the street, and she said that she supports the end to fluoride, and she actually said that her dentist is even against it in the water, so that was a big thing. So Paddy Casey is going to be writing a song. We've actually pre-recorded part of it, so we're going to be releasing a fluoride single in the next few months when he gets around to that. And Yeah, so as we said, breaking into the mainstream media with Hot Press magazine has been a massive, huge help to this campaign. So they've actually been doing an investigation into fluoride for the past 6 months. And if any of you want to access those articles, I'd highly recommend you to go on to hotpress.com, and if you search fluoride, you can actually read them for free online. And there's a really good one, especially all those people who love history. There's an article saying the judgment of the fluoride in the water may have been unsound, and it was based on the case in the 1963, and there was an interview with Richie Ryan, who was the solicitor who took the case, and he was the former Fine Gael finance minister. So again, he's certainly not a conspiracy theorist, and he's still 84 years of age, staunchly against fluoride. So Adrienne Murphy is the Hot Press journalist, and she's continuing to uncover the absolute horrors of this policy. So there's an issue that's out in the shops right now, and I'd really recommend you all get it. It's money well spent, and just to share the articles around, especially with people who don't believe. I think it's a really powerful tool, because when you hear the real story and the context of this issue, it makes much more sense. And my mom, who's in the audience, she is a school teacher, and she's probably the best revolutionary teacher I know. She was working with a group, and they call themselves Little Miss Fluoride Fighters, and they made a lovely puppet show about fluoride, and it was absolutely incredible. They got money to go to primary schools and secondary schools around the country, and you know, the lines in it were absolutely priceless. They had like the man from the HSC, "Oh, man for the HSC, you know, what water do you drink?" And he's like, "Only filtered water for me." All this discrimination just has to stop. Because actually, in the Dáil, they actually have water filters. They have the reverse osmosis filters that filter out the fluoride. So again, any questions about whether you think people are ignorant to this issue, you can just, you know, concentrate on that point. So David Norris is another supporter of the campaign. He's very good. And what's next is I will be taking a High Court case to basically follow in the steps of Gladys Ryan, and we are set to file the papers to the High Court at the end of this month. So I'll be releasing a date to try and get a good publicity day or set around that. I have a legal team that are part of the guys that you don't like, but again, they are nice people and they're happy to work pro bono. So no money's passing on to them. I will have to raise money to bring over expert witnesses, because the case will be set to go through next year. So I will have to bring over experts from America and Canada, various countries around the world. So we will be actually releasing we are making a naked calendar for the Girl Against Fluoride campaign. Got some models, and maybe Aidan Killian is going to be in it as well, potentially. And anyone else who wants to be brave and take off their clothes. But you won't actually, it'll be covered, it'll be nice. So we're going to sell that as well. Yeah, and we're going to be doing a fundraiser gig sometime this year with Paddy Casey, and Monday that will be taking part in Dublin. So again, this is all money that will be going towards the fund to bring over the experts. And in the meantime, I need people to spread the word and to make this well known, because obviously it is a huge issue, and especially when people are battling with things like bank debt and crises in their own lives. I think you need to be really healthy in yourself, and I've met people that told me that they didn't think fluoride was an issue that affected them until they weren't feeling well, and they actually eliminated it from their diet and they started feeling better. And again, we're getting so much contact to the website with people who had thyroid problems and fatigue and low energy and depression, all these kind of things. And when they stopped using the fluoridated water, they actually started to improve. So again, if any of you are suffering with these things, or you know anyone who is, it is something that I recommend. And if you don't have the financial means to install filters, you can get the water which is in Lidl, Carrie Glen, which has been tested by Declan. He's tested all the waters in Ireland, and he's found that's the safest water. So so I really recommend people to stop using fluoridated water. So yeah, please support us on the campaign. You can find us on girlagainstfluoride.com and on Facebook, The Girl Against Fluoride, and Twitter. So so any questions? Probably at the end. I'll hand you over to Aidan.